The separation of church and state is a core value of this nation. However, as the years have gone by, the way in which legislature interacts with this wall between government and religion continues to be discussed frequently. Many believe that through the years of court cases, propositions, and acts, the wall between church and state has turned into more of a fence, with holes allowing parts of each side to influence the other. This is especially due to the formation of the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, or RFRA, which was initially created to protect the practices and ceremonies of indigenous tribes from being blocked by the government, but has later been used for other purposes. We believe that in 2021, Congress should focus on creating a more balanced government, where the institutions of government and religion do not burden one another. The influence of religion in government and vice versa has become invasive and needs to be controlled for the benefit of all Americans.
Religious freedom, it's often used to describe the right of religious exercise and religious worship and expression. There's an additional component, and that is the separation of church and state, the protection against government sponsorship and promotion of religion.
To start off, what is secularism? Secularism, as the Oxford Dictionary defines it, is the principle of separation of the state from religious institutions. It is also commonly referred to as separation of church and state.
To get a better understanding of how this fits into America and our government, let's look at the history of secularism in America.
What some people refer to as the high wall that separates church and state has never been a high wall. Decisions regarding public religiosity, those decisions have actually moved the expectation of the American public and American politicians more toward a secularist ideal, so that we see the deviation from that ideal as being a problem. So you see a kind of back and forth, I think, where you see a more accommodationist vision among Republicans, and you see a more strict separationist vision among Democrats. So I think in American life, it's become a kind of political controversy in football.
But now with all of that in mind, some people feel that in today's America, there is far too much being done with the influence of strong religious groups.
In terms of legislation, we've seen things like RFRA be interpreted in ways that allow organizations and individuals to kind of use their religion as a sword and not a shield. And that is going to take concerted effort to fix.
Starting with dark money of hundreds of millions of dollars. We don't know who donated it, but we know that it's there, and we know that it is paying for very well experienced and researched lobbyists and lawyers to actually go in and advocate for the laws that we want. So just being sympathetic to an issue doesn't mean that you necessarily have to act on it. But when a high-powered lobbyist comes to your office and strongly recommends that you act on it, then now all of a sudden, it's much more likely that you're going to do it long term.
However, it is easy to say that not all religious groups have found themselves being treated with the same preference in legislation. Many religious minorities, including indigenous peoples following Native American religions, have found themselves being oppressed by the U.S. government and deficient legislative action.
So the United States continues to burden Native American religions. There's no real protections to protect grave sites and places that are sacred to American Indians. The border wall between Mexico and the United States is being built, and it was built without any consultation requirements whatsoever, because the U.S. government used a special power where there is a so-called emergency. So the government was not required to consult with the tribes whose lands, whose burials and sacred places, traditional water places and other space has been completely decimated by the building of this huge wall.
But now what do we do? What can we do? How do we get to a more equal America?
There are a lot of regulations that need to be undone. There is legislation that should be passed and written and enacted into federal law.
Well, passing the Do No Harm Act is a big piece of this. A Do No Harm Act is literally to reinstate the do no harm principle of our understanding of religious freedom into RFRA, so that people can't use their religious freedom to discriminate against other protected categories.
Balance has to be struck less at the level of the law and more at the level of the culture, more at the level of opportunities for different communities to come together and try to understand why people would take the actions that they're taking and why it might be harmful.
The United States has an inherent problem because it is and considers itself a Christian nation. By doing so, it sweeps everything else away. until the U.S. Feels comfortable and strong about its diversity, I think it's going to be really difficult to find equity in the law.
We urge Congress to take action on this matter to help create a more secular future so that we all may find light in 2020.